Formed by the forces of fire and water. In the heart of the majestic Columbia River Gorge, there is an 848-foot monolith that beckons those brave enough to explore its cryptic terrain. Overhanging andesite crack and unforgiving thin faces offer a style of rock climbing reserved for the grittiest of explorers.
The climate is so beautiful and so much fun.
And we would come out to Beacon Rock because it was really the premier climbing place for anybody that lived in the Portland metropolitan area.
My memories of climbing are best when I think of looking down past one's heels at the ground 200 or 300 feet away. It focuses one's attention.
This is Beacon Rock, then and now. For more than a century, it has tested pioneers of rock climbing. Today, it beckons intrepid modern rock climbers with new gear, but with the same tenacity of those who went before. And this is the story of 3 of those early vertical adventures. The Spike Route, the Southeast Corner, and Dodge Jam. Our story begins more than 100 years ago in 1901, when Beacon Rock was first climbed by Frank J. Smith, captain of the steamship Regulator on the Columbia River.
Historians have kind of botched the story of why Frank J. Smith climbed Beacon Rock. They claim that there was this bet going on between rival steamship companies, but it's totally untrue because Frank told his story to us later on in his life. And in that story, he simply says that an old gentleman came up to him and said, "Can Beacon Rock be climbed?" He gave sort of a one-word answer, easily. It was a careless remark because it was overheard by his crew, it was overheard by his passengers, and from then on, they wouldn't let go of it. And they kept teasing him and daring him and saying, "When are you gonna climb the rock?" In order to shut everybody up, he had to go try the climb.
Smith recruited 2 young men, George Purser and Charles Church, and set out to explore Beacon's formidable faces.
They circled the entire rock and ran into a dead end. So they retreated back down to a giant boulder. And George Purser, who had had a little bit of mountaineering experience, decided to take a closer look. The closer he got, the better it looked. He started zigzagging, grabbing trees. The other people that were with him said, "My God, he's going up." They didn't want to be left behind, so they started following him. And finally were stopped by a very, very steep wall that they knew couldn't be climbed with just their hands and feet, so they went back. They went and got equipment, a rope, a hammer, a drill bit, and these steel rods, which turned out to be the steel rods that were used on telephone poles at the time. So they got to the base of this 30-foot wall, and they did a 3-person stand. You're standing on ground that's probably slippery. You're up against a steep slope with no way to attach yourself to the cliff. Very unsafe maneuver. Smith took the drill bit, took the hammer, drilled a hole, put one of these steel rods in, stepped up on the steel rod, and was able to finish that 30 feet. The rest of the route was straightforward, and they managed to get to the summit in less than 3 hours. A lot of people had gathered, and because they were skylined up there on the ridge, everybody saw them. They were highly visible. So train going by made that sound that you hear in the background. Steamship going by blew its steam whistle. Farmers ran around their fields setting off shotguns, and women apparently waved their aprons. It was the 1901 equivalent of a party.
Due to the success of the first ascent, a trail was built by local businessman Henry Biddle. This easy path to the summit caused the spike route to fade into obscurity until it was rediscovered by climbers in the 1990s.
The spike route is completely unique.
Nobody had a clue what side it was on. Nobody knew anything about it.
All of the spikes that were placed are still there.
Then I pulled this moss back, and here's this spike, and I just went, my God, this is the route. Whoever did this was obsessed. These things are like a half-inch thick or something, and it looked like they just put them in yesterday. They were so perfect.
I can't think of any other climb in North America that has that original protection still there and still usable.
Unaware of the spike route, and half a century later, a more challenging route on the other side of Beacon Rock captured the curiosity of local climber Fred Goulet.
I'm Fred Goulet. I'm 80 years old. This was pretty standard rock gear when I was climbing in the 50s. Pair of tennis shoes. The rope that we used fastened oneself to the wall.
It was in 1954 when a young Goulet pioneered the classic Southeast Corner route, but not before encountering the local park ranger.
I was driving westbound and looked ahead and saw beautiful rock right there, right by a parking place. And I pulled in, got out, and without any equipment, wearing tennis shoes, began to climb on the only solid rock that I know of in the Columbia Gorge. I'd probably gotten 10 feet off the ground, and the ranger came rolling by and said, "Come down here." And I did, and he said, "You can't climb there." A little more conversation, and he gave me the name of the authority in Olympia that would reconsider that policy. To that person I wrote, and after I don't remember how long, it must have been a long time though, got permission to climb, but out of sight of the highway. I was to climb on the river face of the rock, not anywhere else.
Unknowingly, Fred had obtained permission to explore the most beautiful rock face in the Columbia River Gorge. He immediately asked a friend and reliable climber to join him.
I then sprung the idea on Frank Dessesser, and he said, no, he was not going to go out there. The Columbia Gorge is full of poison oak. I think he suggested that I take up with John Orenshall. Orenshall and I that did the first exploration of that southeast corner. I think Orenshall would have liked to have done some drilling and done some direct aid, but I didn't want to. It was my climb after all.
After looking for the best way up the rock, a difference in style developed, and they parted ways.
Orenshall wanted the first ascent, and he went, I think, the weekend before I was there. The next time that I arrived there, I was surprised, alarmed, distressed to find that the nice sloping slab was littered with pitons and yards of sling rope. Orenshall and Gene Todd had been there ahead of me.
John Orenshall had violated the unwritten rule of climbing and stole the route from Goulet. Undeterred, Fred found a new partner, Don McKay, who shared his vision.
A lovely man. Had very good training. He was 10th Mountain Division. We proceeded up, got to the head wall, and Orenshall had just gone straight up the head wall, putting in bolts, a kind of Germanic approach to climbing.
The route that Fred Goulet pioneered is absolutely amazing. And in fact, I would call it the best route within 100 miles of Portland.
Stepped around the corner where my heels were hanging over a couple hundred feet of the vertical, dramatic east face of Beacon Rock. Not exactly a scramble, it was a climb up to the level of the tree ledge.
When Fred did the second ascent, it essentially was not recognized.
In fact, the right-hand route that Fred Goulet discovered that day in 1954 became the classic southeast corner, and he, not Orenshall, would eventually be recognized as the pioneer.
Ooh, that's the crux for me.
The southeast corner of Beacon is the one I like doing. I've climbed a few other routes on the rock, but it's the southeast corner that for me is, that's really it.
It's a true classic climb. You never really get tired of it. You always get your rush, you get a workout.
Still, Gillette does have one lingering regret.
It's been one of the laments of my life that I didn't clean off all of Orange Shoals hardware. Terrible regret that I didn't do that.
For 7 years, the corner was the only climb on Beacon Rock. But the urge to expand the vertical universe was inevitable. By the 1960s, exploring the unknown became an obsession to Earl Levin and his friends.
My name's Earl Levin. I'm here at Beacon Rock, and it was Eugene Dodd, Bob Martin, and myself. We would look at that face, that South River face, and we'd say, nobody's climbed that. We're going to be the first ones to do that.
Well, my name is Robert Martin, and I'm almost 71 years old. There was a time before the idea of climbing the South Face, the direct route, came into our minds. I thought it was my idea. Earl thinks it's his idea. I think we were both thinking, this is our Yosemite. It's the closest thing to that we have, and we're going to go try it.
Eugene did the first lead. We weren't climbing with chromoly pitons. We were climbing with Army pitons from the Second World War.
It was sort of serendipitous that we met at the same time, most of us. And we climbed a few things before that, but as we got together, then we started doing some harder routes.
And he climbed the first 150 feet, and it was pretty good climbing. I was the next person to go up. It looked really difficult. And I thought, well, we're going to have to bolt up this. And Eugene says, no, I think I can climb this free. I says, you're kidding me. He says, yeah, I think I can climb it free. I'm going to try it. But Eugene was determined to do it. And he was one strong guy. He proceeded to start climbing up. Then he started telling me, I think I'm going to fall. I think I'm going to fall. And I says, well, I'm ready for you. I'm ready for you. He got about halfway up. And I remember there was, on the left-hand side, the rock kind of came out and there was a little horizontal crack. And Eugene said, I need to rest. I'm going to try and put in a piton and hook in a stirrup. And I remember him taking a piton off his belt, and he fitted it in the track, and he tapped it one time, and it popped right back out. And I remember it just floating off in the breeze down. I just watched it float away. And then he got another piton out, and that one stuck. And we didn't know if it was going to hold or not. He put a stirrup on there that we had made, and he put his foot in there, and he rested. But he was pretty exhausted, but he rested long enough, and he went on up to the completion of that overhanging dihedral, and then he brought me up to that point, and we brought Bob up too. That was a phenomenal pitch that Eugene did. Because of that, I called the climb Dodd's Jam.
Another detail recalled by Robert Martin makes Eugene's performance even more incredible.
Eugene was climbing in sloppy fisherman boots. I don't know why. Normally we climbed in big mountain boots. All I know, it was one of the greatest leads I'd ever seen, and the scariest.
So he was kind of like the climber's climber.
He loved to climb like a child likes to scramble over rocks.
It was natural for him. He did it because it was part of his soul.
The first ascent of Dodd's Jam was a milestone in rock climbing. But it was the next generation of climbers in the 1970s who brought new gear and grit.
My name is Jack Brar. I'm 61. Dodd's Jam looked like, the baddest route in the book. I believe the first time we did it, we used pitons, but by the time Wayman and I came back to give it a shot at going free, we used all nuts and chalk stones.
And the old guys would go, oh, nuts are just a fad. No nuts, just balls.
And first of all, they were much easier, quicker. You didn't have to have a hammer. They were lighter. They weren't, this big piece of chromoly steel. Wayne was very driven. He really kind of got into free climbing. He would kind of like get himself in almost a Zen-like state of concentration. If he had had to stop on tension and rest, he would have had to come back and do it again to prove that it was done right.
Wayne's free ascent was part of a movement in the climbing world to concentrate on free climbing. Best style, no more pitons. Save the rock, free climb.
When I first got out here in '76, there was a huge activity. All the climbers were putting up routes everywhere. There was something like 20, 30 routes, I think, went up that year. And they wouldn't teach me any aid. They would only teach me free climbing. And when I asked how hard it was, everything was 5.7. It didn't matter. They had just started using hex nuts and stoppers. It had just gone for like a year or so before from the pounding in pitons on lead to actually passive gear. And that's how you really develop your skills. And if you can climb all the stuff here, you can go to these places and you can climb anything.
It's definitely the best crack climbing in the gorge, like by far. I kind of like the tree action. Makes everything just a little bit more naturalistic.
Well, outside of Yosemite, this is my favorite place here in Beacon Rock.
A little of that magic gorge. This is not the gym feeling. Man, this rock is as hard as steel.
There are large, extraordinarily fine faces that are, I believe, unclimbed.
Even though it's famous for its cracks, you're not going to find a wider variety of climbing.
There is nothing like Beacon Rock.
Patience and tenacity are the passwords. Just keep at them.
Every single nook and cranny is different.
You have to be prepared to maybe even run it out a little bit.
But I'm still here doing it. That's kind of thrilling, in fact.
We became friends for life. I mean, there was really something special about those experiences. So I would encourage any young person, if they had the opportunity to climb, it's something they should try.
It's going to train you to be a lot more competent in the mountains or Yosemite or wherever it is you want to go in the rest of the world.